Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another episode of 100 Days of DevOps. If you're seeing this channel for the first time, we've been trying to cover DevOps in 100 days and we are currently in the phase 5. We're starting the phase 5. Today, we've been on phase 1 to phase 4, which includes um, fundamentals, that's the IT fundamentals such as Linux, networking, Git, bash scripting, and the likes. And then we progressed to containers, where we talked about Docker and everything that has to do with containerization. We looked at continuous integration, we covered Jenkins. We also covered GitHub Actions, and we did quite a few things with those two tools. And we progressed from there to Azure, that's cloud, which was the phase that which was the phase that was just completed, which is phase 4. We looked at different things that pertains to cloud. We also tried to provision resources. We created an Azure account. We provisioned some resources. So we did a little one or two things with the Azure platform. And towards the ending of that particular series, there was a time I made reference to how resources have been created on the Azure platform. I said we can create those resources by going to the portal and then clicking through create resource. We can also create those resources through the CLI, that's the command line interface, which we did. And then I mentioned that we can also use APIs. So we focus more on creating things with the portal and creating things with the CLI. So this particular phase is where we are going to create things by calling Azure API. And how to do that is what particularly using to this particular phase, which is infrastructure as a code. So basically, uh, what do we understand by infrastructure as a code? As a good engineer, the first thing you need to ask is why. Why is a question that should always be in the mind of any good engineer, because it's not just knowing the tools, it is not just knowing how it works. Getting a good understanding of why this tool came into place, what problem is this tool trying to solve, it's really going to help in understanding how to manipulate this tool, how exactly to use it to benefit. So today it's just going to be the introduction of an overview of what infrastructure as a code is. And then over the next couple of days, it will be up to 10 days or less, we're going to try to see how we can do things using infrastructure as code. And we're going to focus majorly on Terraform because it's like the most popular tool for implementing infrastructure as code. So let's go back to why infrastructure as a code is actually um, necessary or needed. During the one of the episodes in Azure, if you have not watched those videos, if you're seeing this channel for the first time, I'll explain what we want to achieve. And before you come to this video, I always say all the previous videos are layered upon each other. So the best way for you to understand the video is to watch the previous ones and the ones before. It gives you a good understanding because we've even from the very, very first day, every video has been a step above the previous one. So that's why if you watch some of my videos, you will see that I always make reference to previous videos because it's like a journey. Every video, every episode counts. It's all part of the bigger picture. So in the last phase, which is phase 4, I mentioned that when you want to create a resource, say you want to create a single VM, a single virtual machine, you can always go to the Azure portal and virtual machine. You can always go to the Azure portal, click on set your virtual machine, click on it, follow the prompts, and then you create your virtual machine, right? If you want to create a storage account, you can do the same thing. If you want to create an Azure key vault, you can do all these things. But what we are trying to mimic here is They're trying to make how things are done in a production environment to give us at least a little bit of an idea of how things are done in a production environment. Now, when you're tasked with creating maybe one virtual machine, two virtual machine, or even three virtual machine, or let me make this even more practical. So let's say, for example, you want to run an application and you have a front end, a back end, and a database. So let's say this is the front end. I'm just going to copy this, and this is a back end, and the back end connects to the database. In our Docker session, we also looked at this where the front end, obviously front end, back end. Only the backend has access to connect to the database. So now the task to create this is an application. We have one front end, one back end, and database. And they tell you, okay, provision these virtual machines or provision these web apps. You can always go to the portal, click on web app, create the front end, create the back end, create the database, connect it together, do that on the Azure portal, and it's fine, right? You can even use the command line interface, that CLI, to provision all these things. It's very, very simple to do. But in some cases, in a production environment, you will not have one single web app or one single server for the front end. You will not have one single server for the back end. You will not have one single environment. You have various environments. You have let's say you have the test environment, you have the staging environment, you have the production environment, and even in the production environment, you have the DR. So now for the test environment, you have, let's say, you're using two virtual machines for the front end. You're using two, you're using two virtual machines for the back end, and then you have two database servers, right? And you know that once you're using more than one virtual machine or more than one web app, you need something called a load balancer. So that means you will need a load balancer for the front end, load balancer for the back end, and most likely a load balancer for the database. So we're talking of three extra load balancers. Three load balancers. This is just for the test environment. For the staging environment, you can have up to 3 or 4 virtual machines for the front end. You can have up to 4 virtual machines for the back end. You can have 3 database servers. And now you want to make it highly available. When something is highly available, we are making sure that there's redundancy. So now we're not using just one load balancer, we're using like 2 load balancers each. So now let's say we're looking at 6 load balancers, right? So you might now you're seeing how much virtual machines that need to be provisioned in a production environment. Let's say you have let's just say you have similar thing with the staging, because the staging is always a mix of, or a yes, a very, very close similitude, yes, to the production environment. But this time around, let's say you have let's just increase this virtual machine count by 1. You have 5, you have 4. So you still have the same number of load balancers, and this is replicated to the disaster recovery. So when you look at this now, you're having over, let's say this is how many, you have 2, 4, 6. For the test alone, it's 9. You're provisioning 9 resources. For staging, you're provisioning almost 20 resources. For production, same thing, and GR, same thing. So when you look at it in total, you are provisioning close to 50 virtual machines. You can't do that using the portal. You can go to the portal and start clicking and trying to provide and try to um, provision close to 50 virtual machines. First off, it will take you time. It will take you time. It takes a lot of time if you want to do that manually. Secondly, trying to do it in a human way, you're going to make errors. There will definitely be errors. That's one of the things I'm saying the benefits of I'm saying the reasons why infrastructure as code came into play. Because now the first challenge we have is it takes time to provision these things manually. Because you have to start going to the portal, click on virtual machine. Even if you want to do a virtual machine skill set, it will take time, right? Then secondly, you are prone to human error. You're prone to human error. And then thirdly, we want to achieve consistency in the environment because this is the production application that is going to, be live and be accessed by customers. So we want to make sure that there's consistency in the environment. Another thing is when you want to decommission these servers, it takes time also because you have to start going one by one to decommission them. So there's also like time consumption. And since you're working with the cloud, there's a possibility that you would risk incurring more cost. You will incur more cost because let's say for example now you're done with what you want to do, then you want to decommission the servers. And it takes you, let's say, it takes you about 5 hours to decommission the servers. Within those 5 hours, you're not making any gain from these servers. Azure will charge you for those 5 hours that you spend decommissioning this particular environment because you are doing it annually, you're doing it one after the other. So these are the things that have been put into consideration and then said, okay, some persons, came in and said, oh, how do we make things easier for developers or for engineers rather to spin up virtual machines to create environments where there will be no issues that can be reproduced and will not take time. And this is one of the things, this is one of the reasons why infrastructure as code was created in the first place to help things get done faster, to help things get done properly. Yeah, there's also there's also reduced possibility of an error. So I hope we've been able to understand what infrastructure as code is. So now, if I'm going to define it, I'll say the infrastructure as code is the practice of managing and provisioning IT infrastructure using code, enabling automation, automated, consistent, and repeatable deployment. Just like I said, it's automated and it is consistent. There's little room for errors. So and I also put here that one of these are the how do I say it now? These are the how do I put it? These are the four things that the construction as code has come to um help us to do consistency and reliability, speed and automation, cost and risk reduction, version control and collaboration. It's exactly what I've been saying in the past couple of minutes. It saves time, it makes things get done faster. It it also helps in cost management and version control and all of that. So now there are different tools for infrastructure as code. Yes, there are different tools for infrastructure as code, and some of these tools, the first is Terraform. We have Pulumi. We have AWS, AWS Cloud Formation. We have Azure Bicep. We have Azure Azure templates, and you know we have different things. So now for AWS Cloud Formation, for Azure Bicep, for Azure templates, those ones are specific or they are peculiar to those cloud providers. Azure has their own, which is Bicep and templates. AWS has AWS Cloud Formation. Then GCP also has that. Forgotten what GCP calls theirs. But the issue is that you cannot use, just like I said, they are only peculiar to their providers. You cannot use Azure Bicep for AWS. You cannot use AWS Cloud Formation for Azure. So now that's why we have tools like Terraform and Pulumi. Terraform and Pulumi, they work with um different, how do I put it now? Different cloud providers using the provider plugin. We'll talk about all of that in subsequent episode. Today is just a brief introduction of what infrastructure as code is, and after that, focus on one, two, and then we'll see how to make the most out of it. So Terraform, Pulumi, they are not tied to one specific cloud provider. You can you can use Terraform with Azure, you can use Terraform with GCP, you can use Terraform with AWS, you can even use Terraform with on-prem VMware, that's VMware vSphere, and all of that. So and that is why most times they will say it's better to learn Terraform, because if you want to actually speak with just Azure, you can go ahead and if you're good with Azure Bicep or if you're good with Azure templates, then to an extent you're fine. But you have limited capability or limited limited technical capability. Because if what is tomorrow you find yourself you're a cloud engineer or you're a DevOps engineer, and tomorrow you find yourself working with AWS, now you have to start learning AWS Cloud Formation. So, and then maybe some other time you find yourself working with GCP, and then you start having to go and learn GCP again. But and that's it could be a lot. It could be overwhelming. So that's why Terraform, tools like Pulumi, they've come so that okay, once you just learn one, if you learn Terraform, you can use Terraform in any environment that you want to actually work in. Like I said, you just use the provider. So provider is what enables you to work with different environments. So out of all of this, I think we worked with Azure templates during the Azure phase of this particular series. Yes, we are not going to work with AWS CloudFormation because we are not looking at AWS, and yeah, we will look at either of these two, and I mentioned that we are going to work with Terraform. So majorly we are going to work with Terraform. We'll see Terraform is you might want to ask what's the difference between Terraform and Pulumi. Well, they do the same thing. It's just the same thing, like it's just the same thing as Jenkins and GitHub Actions. The concept is the same. The tool is just different, and the way it is designed. The same thing with Azure and AWS. It's still the same cloud platform. The concept is the same, just the interfaces are different. So Terraform and Pulumi are no different. So you can pick either Terraform or you pick Pulumi. I personally have not worked with Pulumi before, so I'm going to stick with what I have worked with, which is Terraform. So we're going to be looking at Terraform. We're going to focus majorly on Terraform in the phase 5 of this particular journey. So we're going to install over the next days, we're going to install Terraform. We'll see how Terraform works, and we'll see how to deploy things using Terraform, and hopefully we're able to gain one or two things in this particular phase of this journey. So I hope I've been able to um, do justice to a brief introduction of why infrastructure as code is very, very important, what role it has come to help with. And I've also mentioned the different tools in which we can be able to achieve infrastructure as code, and we're going to focus majorly on Terraform, and you see how best we can get the most out of Terraform, how we can use Terraform. And just to make mention that we're going to be working with Terraform and Azure, because we just finished the Azure phase of 100 days. So we are going to use Terraform to provision things on our Azure platform. So if you're yet to see the video, the phase that's the Azure, the cloud Azure phase before this particular one, I would advise that you watch the videos that I did on Azure. That gives you a very good knowledge of what we are trying to do here. And then you need to also create your account. So if you don't have an Azure account, you have challenges in this particular phase. You also have challenge with the previous phase and this one too. So because you need an Azure account to practice these things. We're not just here to do theoretical teaching. We're here to we're here to do hands-on and see how we can make the most out of all these tools and see how we can benefit ourselves. So that will be all for me for now. The next episode, we'll start doing things and we'll look into Terraform basically, and then we'll see how to install Terraform, see how to work with Terraform, and then I'll touch on one or two things regarding Terraform also. So if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, please do well to subscribe to my channel. You can share the videos with your loved ones, with anyone who is interested in learning how they're learning DevOps. And one more thing, make sure that you turn on your notification bell. It's very, very important that you turn on your notification bell so that whenever I post new videos, you get those videos immediately. You can watch them, you can practice, and then you can also add to your knowledge. So I'll see you on the next video. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.